I want to talk to you today a little bit about England's golden generation. I'm not actually talking about this current crop of Gareth Southgate players that has managed to reach a couple of finals without actually getting over the line in a final. I want to talk to you about the real golden generation, the one from the early 2000s, this lot. Now, when it goes back to this generation of players, the golden generation of players, the question is always the same. How did that squad not win anything? So the term golden generation, where did that come from? Well, it came from Adam Crozier, who was the FA chief executive at the time, and it kind of followed that crop of players that included the likes of Lampard, David Beckham, Paul Scholes, Sol Campbell, Rio, Wayne Rooney, basically pretty much that minus Nick Barmby. And it was at a time when England had a depth of talent that was all competing for European success and titles domestically, but the wealth it had in certain positions was an absolute joke. When you look at the centre-halves that we had alone, of course you had Rio and Sol Campbell, which was the centre-half partnership, but you also had Ledley King, Jonathan Woodgate. Les Scott was coming through with this sort of era. You had John Terry, you had Jamie Carragher. It was a serious quality crop of centre-halves. Now, just on the centre-halves in isolation, you kind of wonder how we didn't manage to win something in that time. And I think people are looking at it in isolation far too much. This England team that we've just seen at the Euros, that was a good team. There's players there that you would agree are undoubtedly world class. I think Phil Foden, I think Harry Kane, I think Jude Bellingham, I'd say Declan Rice, dare I say Kobe Mainoo. There's players that are winning all sorts, like John Stones and Kyle Walker. Pickford's never really let the England side down. So you're going, well, this England side is a good side. Is it better than the previous ones that didn't manage to win stuff? In my opinion, no. I think those sides were better. I think those sides just unfortunately came up in a bit of a golden era for multiple countries. England were getting matched up against some of the best international sides we've ever seen. Some of the squads that we were up against were almost mythical. Now, when you look at that Brazil team that we lost to in 2002, one of the most entertaining and stacked teams that's ever walked onto a football pitch. I mean, these names are all-time greats of the game. Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Ronaldo. I mean, the Ballon d'Ors just in those three alone, let alone the likes of Cafu and Roberto Carlos also coming into that team. The current Italy side, do you think they're thinking, oh, this is a team that could compete with Pirlo, with Totti, Cannavaro, Gattuso, and De Rossi and Buffon? Madness. And the Germany sides of that era as well, Kahn, Ballack, Didier Mann, Linker, just Schweinsteiger, Lahm, younger players in that era, but still playing. Even Spain, which is its predecessor of the Spanish team that went on to dominate football for a few years. You know, they still had Hierro and Puyol and Casillas and Raul, Enrique, Morientes, Elguera. Argentina, oh my, one of the best international sides. They didn't win stuff. We're talking Ayala, Batistuta, Simeone, Veron, Zanetti, Aymar, Crespo, Samuel, do you know what I mean? And then France. Yes, France were picking up trophies in these times. Henry, Vieira, Zidane, Bartes, Thuram, Magalele. Was it a golden generation for England? Or was it a golden generation for football? Now, I think one of the biggest reasons and the biggest criticism that people have with the golden generation of England was its tactical instructions that were being asked of the players. The one that sticks out the most is the use of the 4-4-2. This is Sven. This is all on Sven. 4-4-2, where he's trying to play Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard as a two, and Paul Scholes gets boshed out on the left wing just to accommodate Lampard and Gerrard, who at the time are scoring a lot of goals domestically and in Europe, but were never going to work as a two. How anyone thought that was going to happen at the time is beyond me. There was just so much wrong with trying to squeeze those two, and the end result was you saw England deployed without any balance, no cover, no familiarity. The only person you could argue that was playing in the correct position in that 4-4-2 was David Beckham. The only one that's played on the right-hand side of a four, or in that position that he was asked to play in. Another massive dynamic of that time, when you listen to the England players start talking, is that the morale and the dynamics in the dressing room were all off. And United, we probably have to take a massive chunk of the blame for that, because people like to talk about that there was cliques in the dressing room. But basically it was United and then everybody else. And maybe United didn't even realise that they were doing it because the United lads that was in the England squad were such a close core of mates. Maybe they didn't realise that it was probably detrimental to the England side. Something that, maybe is a little bit different for the England team of today. And when you come to the pressure, there is a lot of pressure when it comes to playing for England. Maybe the pressure was too much for some of these. Lampard made it known that the golden generation was a term that he felt massively burdened the squad, and one of the reasons why he thinks the national team crumbled. But let's not forget, David Beckham had the balls to continue with England, not just continue with England, excel for England after the horrific treatment that was forced upon him by the England supporters following the red card in '98. There was effigies, there was death threats, there was a full-on hate campaign, a dartboard with his face on it in the English media. All of the things that David Beckham had going on, he still had the balls to turn out for his country, and not just turn out, but put in some big performances. That penalty he took and scored against Argentina, that free kick against Greece. There's a lot of iconic moments in an England shirt from David Beckham after what happened to him in '98. So this is someone that can definitely deal with pressure. But even today, you see the racist abuse that was targeted at Sancho, Saka and Rashford following the last Euros. It highlights the extremes that certain sections of the England fan base are willing to go to against their own players. And this added pressure still exists today. Back then, the expectations were sky high. But what did they achieve? Were they successful? They achieved nothing in the grand scheme of things. Looking at each year of the major international competitions, 2002, 2004, 2006, you can see exactly where England were falling short, and it isn't just in those respective competitions. In 2002, England crashed out of the World Cup in Japan and South Korea against Brazil. We lost 2-1 following that deadly Ronaldinho free kick which loved David Seaman. And that year they drew a lot. In friendlies, in the World Cup, in the qualifiers combined, England drew to Netherlands, Sweden, South Korea, Cameroon, Portugal and North Macedonia. 6 out of 13 games were drawn, and 4 of those draws were before the World Cup. So there was clearly a killer instinct or some sort of a systematic flow that was missing in that team. In 2004, and they played in the Euros, it was another failure of a year, knocked out by Portugal in another penalty shootout. Cristiano Ronaldo sent England packing, and not for the last time. England should and probably could have done better. The penalty misses from Beckham and Darius Vassell were decisive against Portugal. In 2006, it felt like the prime opportunity for England to go and secure global glory in the World Cup. And once again, it wasn't meant to be. Again, they crashed out to Portugal on penalties, and arguably a worse Portugal side to the one that you lost against 2 years before. There was an easy group: Trinidad and Tobago, Paraguay and Sweden. It was basically a ticket to the next round. They barely made it through the round of 16 against Ecuador. Yes, it was a David Beckham free kick, but again, no consistency. The style of play was too rigid. 2006, we're talking peak 4-3-3 times, and all of the countries in world football have changed and adapted to playing this. England are still stuck in a 4-4-2. Asking David Beckham to play on that right-hand side of the wing, and we've got no natural midfielders in there that can do the job. And you're asking Lampard and Gerrard to do stuff that they do not do for their clubs. Overall, England were knocked out of the quarterfinals in 3 major tournaments in the 2000s, and then they failed to qualify for Euro 2008. At a time, by the way, when English football had 10 players starting the Champions League final. All they were missing was a goalkeeper, and they could have played a full 11. So what needed changing? Now, hindsight's 2020, of course, but there were some blatant, obvious alterations that this England squad could have taken that would have taken them to the promised line, because they had the talent. Were there better options in midfield than 4-4-2? Definitely. In 2006, Owen Hargreaves would have slotted into that like a glove, and you could have played a fantastic midfield three. 4-3-3 would have given England the control and stability that it needed. They would have been able to accommodate arguably England's best team. David Beckham could have played as an 8. You could have used Lampard or Gerrard or Scholes as the number 10. And with a 3, you can start dictating and deciding games. Imagine having Lampard on for 70, 80 minutes and bringing Steven Gerrard on when you need a goal. Then there's the question of what you're going to do with someone like a Nicky Butt. There was options as the number 6, loads of them. Could have been Nicky Butt, could have been Owen Hargreaves, could have been Michael Carrick. Now, there were concerns about not having a natural left winger, but Ashley Cole could have been shunted up a little bit higher. He had the attacking prowess. You could have played Wayne Rooney off the left-hand side, as we saw him utilised so well for Manchester United, if you'd have played a 4-3-3. I tell you, you didn't want to put on the left wing, though. Paul fucking Scholes. Overall, the question that we want to answer is, was England golden generation all that? Should they have won something, or are people just looking at it in isolation? For me, I think it was an incredible team. I think it's probably the best England team we've seen, but I think it was mismanaged. I think trying to play a 4-4-2 with that team would have been as idiotic as trying to play a 4-4-2 with the current team that we've got now in the current situation that we find ourselves in world football. Is the current England team a golden generation? Is it better than the one that we saw at the start of 2000s? For me, no. And I think it's a team that's done really well, and it's done things that those England teams couldn't do. I think it's just dealing in a more shallow pool, and I think there were some horrendous mistakes made by managers 20 years ago. That's my take. Please let me know yours in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Laters. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.